Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm discussing the classic novel, The Outsiders, written by S.E. Hinton. And first of all, her full name is actually Susan Eloise Hinton. She uses her initials because her publisher was worried that reviewers would judge the book harshly because they would feel that a girl couldn't write from the point of view of a boy and write about this type of subject matter. But she later said that she liked having the privacy of her own real name and this public name out there with just her initials, S.E. Hinton. So she was okay with it after the fact. But she started writing this book when she was only 15 years old. And the inspiration for it was a real-life experience for her in which she was walking home from school one day with one of her friends, and then he was jumped and beaten up by the popular kids because he was a greaser. And so she went home and just wrote that first scene in the novel in which our main character, Ponyboy, is jumped by the Socs. That's S-O-C-S. Otherwise known as the Socials, because it's all about that rivalry between those two gangs. So she wrote the majority of the book when she was 16, a junior in high school, and then it was published when she was 18 years old, in 1967. And so this was her very first novel. And it's incredible that she wrote it so young. And it's, of course, a classic. It's so tragic and touching and powerful and wonderfully written. And the story sticks with you and those characters feel so real. And so the book is told in first-person point of view from our main character, Ponyboy Curtis. Ponyboy is the youngest member of the group. He's 14 years old. And he's very insightful and deep. And he is really book smart, but he's also very observant and emotional as well. And so with the beginning of the novel, he's walking home alone because he went to see a movie by himself because he likes being immersed in films. It's an escape for him. And he describes his appearance and he says, "I have light brown, almost red hair and greenish gray eyes. I wish they were more gray because I hate most guys that have green eyes. But I have to be content with what I have. My hair is longer than a lot of boys wear theirs, squared off in back and long at the front and sides. But I am a greaser, and most of my neighborhood rarely bothers to get a haircut. Besides, I look better with long hair." And so with the greasers, they have pride in their hair. That's a big trait for all of them. This long, greasy hair, hence the greasers. And so this rivalry is between the classes because the greasers are the poor kids and they're just seen as hoods because they're tough looking. And then there's the Socials who are the rich kids, but they're snobby and they're very cold. And as Ponyboy is walking home, he is jumped by the greasers and they pin him down and they pull a blade on him, threatening to cut his hair. But before anything truly awful can happen, his friends and his brothers come to help him. So we meet the other members of the greaser gang. We meet Ponyboy's oldest brother, Darry. His full name is Daryl. And Ponyboy says that Darry is 6'2" and broad-shouldered and muscular. He has dark brown hair that kicks out in front and a slight cowlick in the back, just like Dad's, but Darry's eyes are his own. He's got eyes that are like two pieces of pale blue-green ice. They've got a determined set to them, like the rest of him. He looks older than 20, tough, cool, and smart. He would be real handsome if his eyes weren't so cold. He doesn't understand anything that is not plain hard fact, but he uses his head. And so, at the start of the novel, Ponyboy feels tension with his older brother, his oldest brother, Dari, because Dari, sadly, is now his main guardian because we learn that their parents were tragically killed in a car accident 8 months prior to the start of this novel. And so Ponyboy doesn't understand his perspective at first, why Dari is so hard on him. But he loves his other brother, Soda Pop. He describes Soda as follows. Soda is handsomer than anyone else I know. Not like Dari. Soda's movie star kind of handsome, the kinds that people stop on the street to watch go by. He's not as tall as Dari, and he's a little slimmer, but he has a finely drawn, sensitive face that somehow manages to be reckless and thoughtful at the same time. He's got dark gold hair that he combs back, long and silky and straight, and in the summer, the sun bleaches it to a shining, weak gold. His eyes are dark brown, lively, dancing, recklessly laughing eyes that can be gentle and sympathetic one moment and blazing with anger the next. He has Dad's eyes, but Soda is one of a kind. He can get drunk in a drag race or dancing without ever getting near alcohol. In our neighborhood, it's rare to find a kid who doesn't drink once in a while, but Soda never touches a drop. He doesn't need to. He gets drunk on just plain living, and he understands everybody. And so then we also meet Soda's best friend, Steve Randall, who's 17, tall and lean, and he describes that his hair is always combed in complicated swirls. And then another member of their gang is 2-Bit Matthews. His real name is Keith, but they call him 2-Bit because he's always wisecracking and he has to throw in his 2-bit, his 2 cents into everything. And then Ponyboy talks about the real character of the gang. It would be Dallas Winston, Dally. I used to like to draw his picture when he was in a dangerous mood, for then I could get his personality down in a few lines. He had an elfish face, with high cheekbones and a pointed chin, small, sharp animal teeth and ears like a lynx. His hair was almost white, it was so blonde, and he didn't like haircuts or hair oil either. So it fell over his forehead in wisps, and kicked out in the back in tufts, and curled behind his ears and along the nape of his neck. His eyes were blue, blazing ice, cold with the hatred of the whole world. Dally had spent 3 years on the wild side of New York and had been arrested at the age of 10. He was tougher than the rest of us. Tougher, colder, meaner. The shade of difference that separates a greaser from a hood wasn't present in Dally. And then the last member of their gang is Johnny Cade. And Ponyboy says, if you can picture a little dark puppy that has been kicked too many times and is lost in a crowd of strangers, you'll have Johnny. He was the youngest, next to me, smaller than the rest, with a slight build. He had big black eyes in a dark tanned face. His hair was jet black and heavily greased and combed to the side, but it was so long that it fell in shaggy bangs across his forehead. He had a nervous, suspicious look in his eyes, and that beating he got from the Socs didn't help matters. He was the gang's pet, everyone's kid brother. His father was always beating him up, and his mother ignored him, except when she was hacked off at something, and then you could hear her yelling at him clear down at our house. I think he hated that worse than getting whipped. He would have run away 1,000,000 times if we hadn't been there. If it hadn't been for the gang, Johnny would never have known what love and affection are. So Johnny has it the roughest, and it's truly tragic and awful that he comes from this horrible household. And we also learn he was beat up so badly by the Socs that he could have died. And so in chapter 2, we meet Marcia and Cherry Valance. And when they go to the movie theater and Dally is trying to hit on the girls, but she's getting annoyed and telling him to leave her alone, but he doesn't listen. The only time he listens is when Johnny, the ever quiet kid, he flat out tells Dally to stop. And then Dally is taken aback, but he gets up and walks away and leaves the girls alone. And Ponyboy notes that Johnny doesn't usually talk like that, let alone to Dally, who he knows is a loose cannon. But with Cherry, her real name is Sherry, but they call her Cherry because she has red hair. But she is a Soch, and she explains that she and Marcia were with their boyfriends Bob and Randy, but they had gotten drunk, so they were just there by themselves. And so it's that first real interaction that Ponyboy gets with one of the Soches, where they're just talking as people. It's nothing about class or anything like that. They're just two people. But Ponyboy confides in Cherry what happened to Johnny, that the Soches beat him up so badly he nearly died. And in fact, one of them turned out to be her boyfriend, Bob, and he had these rings that really injured Johnny and could have killed him. And when they found him, he was crying hysterically because it was just so terrible. And after Ponyboy tells her the story, she is just so shaken by it. But she tells him that all Soches aren't like that. You have to believe me, Ponyboy. Not all of us are like that. And then she goes on to say, I'll bet you think the Soches have it made. The rich kids, the West Side Soches. I'll tell you something, Ponyboy, and it may come as a surprise. We have troubles you've never even heard of. You want to know something? Things are rough all over. And he says, I believe you. From Ponyboy's perspective, these Soches are these monsters. But from Cherry's perspective, she's saying everyone has it rough. But then, by the end of that chapter, Ponyboy says, I really couldn't see what Soches would have to sweat about. Good grades, good cars, good girls, Madras and Mustangs and Corvairs. Man, I thought, if I had worries like that, I'd consider myself lucky. I know better now. But then, after the movie, when they're walking home, Cherry sums up what it is that's truly different about the Soches and the Greasers. Because first Ponyboy thinks it's about money that separates them. But Cherry says, no, it's not just money. Part of it is, but not all. You Greasers have a different set of values. You're more emotional. We're sophisticated. Cool to the point of not feeling anything. Nothing is real with us. So then Ponyboy understands. That's why we're separated. It's not money, it's feeling. You don't feel anything and we feel too violently. But with Cherry, Ponyboy opens up to her more, and he tells her more about Soda and Soda's horse that he loved named Mickey Mouse back when he hung out around stables and rodeos. But then the horse was sold. But the point of that is that it's showing them more as people, and that they're more than just what the Socs see them as, which is greasers. That's all they see them as. That they're people with feelings and interests, and they're more than just their circumstances and appearance. But Ponyboy still just doesn't see eye to eye about Derry, and when she asks about him, he says, he's not like Soda Pop at all, and he sure ain't like me. He's hard as a rock and about as human. He's got eyes exactly like frozen ice. He thinks I'm a pain in the neck. He likes Soda. Everybody likes Soda, but he can't stand me. I bet he wishes he could stick me in a home somewhere, and he'd do it too if Soda'd let him. But then Johnny tries to tell him that that's not true, that they get along, and he says, no, we don't, and you better shut your trap because you're not wanted at home either. And then 2-Bit tells him to shut up, that's a terrible thing to say, but Johnny says, it's the truth, I don't care. And then Ponyboy finally says, it ain't fair that we have all the rough breaks. And he says to us, the readers, I didn't know exactly what I meant, but I was thinking about Johnny's father being a drunk and his mother a selfish slob, and 2-Bit's mother being a barmaid to support him and his kid sister after their father ran out on them, and Dally, wild, cunning Dally, turning into a hoodlum because he'd die if he didn't, and Steve, his hatred for his father coming out in his soft, bitter voice and the violence of his temper. Soda Pop, a dropout so he could get a job and keep me in school, and Darry, getting old before his time, trying to run a family and hold on to 2 jobs and never having any fun, while the Socs had so much spare time and money that they jumped us and each other for kicks, had beer blasts and river bottom parties because they didn't know what else to do. Things were rough all right, all over the east side. It just didn't seem right to me. And then when the 2 boys show up again, Randy and Bob, once again threatening the greasers, and 2-Bit pulls out a blade and he breaks a soda bottle and gives it to Ponyboy to go and cut them. But Cherry gets hysterical, telling them to stop, that she hates fights. But she finally says she'll go off with them because she doesn't want them to fight. And before she leaves, she tells Ponyboy quietly that I could fall in love with Dallas Winston. I hope I never see him again, or I will. And Ponyboy is just struck dumb by those words, because Cherry sees him beyond his tough exterior. And so then Ponyboy and Johnny just lie down on the ground and look up at the stars, wishing for a better life for themselves, that things weren't this way, that they didn't have to live in fear and filled with hatred and violence. And Johnny is basically reaching a breaking point, and he says, I can't take much more. I'll kill myself or something. But Ponyboy immediately says, don't. You can't kill yourself, Johnny. And Johnny says, well, I won't, but I gotta do something. It seems like there's gotta be some place without greasers or Socs, with just people. Plain, ordinary people. And Ponyboy says, out of the big towns, in the country. And so he just dreams about living in the country and that his parents are alive again and they just have a happy life, and Soda Pop could get the horse Mickey Mouse back that he loved. And then Ponyboy dozes off, so when he wakes up it's really late, and when he goes home, Darry is there waiting for him saying, where have you been? He gets really angry, and Soda's telling him to not be so hard on him, but he yells at him, telling him, if I want to hear about what I do with my kid brother, I'll ask my other kid brother. And then Ponyboy snaps, saying, don't yell at him. And then finally, the anger escalates, and Darry hits Ponyboy. And he goes to apologize, but Ponyboy just runs out, and he runs back to Johnny, who's sleeping in the park by himself because he doesn't like going home. And Ponyboy says that they're running away. And so after they run, they calm down. Then they sit in the park, and the Socs come up to them again, drunk, and saying, why were you with our girls? And they take Ponyboy, they put his head under the fountain, trying to drown him. And Ponyboy is trying to fight back as best he can, but he's coughing, and they're trying to kill him. And then all of a sudden everything goes still, and they run away. And Johnny just says, I killed him. I killed that boy. And he had killed Bob, Cherry's boyfriend, and the boy that beat Johnny up so badly. He pulled a blade out on him and stabbed him to death. And so now their lives take this sharp turn for utter survival. They'll be wanted for murder. And so they run to the only person who can help them, who is Dally. And when they explain what happens, Dally just swoops in to help them. He gives them a gun, he gives them money. He's saying, go up to Windricksville, to this abandoned church. And that's it, they're just on the run now. And so this all just happens so fast, but they have no choice. And so then they go up to Windricksville. They're in this old abandoned church. And when Johnny gets back with supplies, Ponyboy sees that he got a copy of Gone with the Wind. And Johnny says, I remembered you saying something about it once, and me and you went to see that movie, remember? I thought you could maybe read it out loud and help kill time or something. But then he sees that Johnny got peroxide and that they need to cut their hair and Ponyboy needs to bleach his hair so they can't meet their descriptions. And so they have to change their appearance, a part of their identity and who they are, with their hair. And so then when they do that, they're just in hiding for the next few days. And then there's one point where Ponyboy says, one morning I woke up earlier than usual. Johnny and I slept huddled together for warmth. Dally had been right when he said it would get cold where we were going. Being careful not to wake Johnny up, I went to sit on the steps and smoke a cigarette. The dawn was coming then. All the lower valley was covered with mist, and sometimes little pieces of it broke off and floated away in small clouds. The sky was lighter in the east, and the horizon was a thin golden line. The clouds changed from gray to pink, and the mist was touched with gold. There was a silent moment when everything held its breath, and then the sun rose. It was beautiful. And then Johnny says, golly, that sure was pretty. All gold and silver. And then he says, too bad it couldn't stay like that all the time. And Ponyboy says, nothing gold can stay. And he recalls a poem that he read. And the poem is, nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. And he explains that it's a poem by Robert Frost. He says, I always remembered it because I never quite got what he meant by it. And Johnny says, I never noticed colors and clouds and stuff until you kept reminding me about them. It seems like they were never there before. And so it's just that moment where they're appreciating true beauty and that it's this calming feeling for them. They could just sit and watch the sunset and not worry so much about their troubles and not feel like they're outsiders. Just that they're people. Because earlier in the novel, when he was talking to Cherry, he said that maybe Cherry stood still and watched the sunset while she was supposed to be taking out the garbage. Just stood there and watched it. And he says, it seemed funny to me that the sunset she saw from her patio and the one I saw from the back steps was the same one. Maybe the two different worlds we lived in weren't so different. We saw the same sunset. So it's a symbol of unifying everyone, that everyone does have their struggles and hard things that they go through. And then when Dally finally comes for them, he explains that the kid that Johnny had killed had a lot of friends and that there's going to be a rumble and that if the Greasers win, they'll stay out of their turf for good. And if the Socs win, that everything goes on as normal. But it's the first contact for Ponyboy and Johnny with the outside world. And Dally gives Ponyboy a letter from his brother Soda saying that he and Darry are worried about him and Darry's awful sorry that he hit him. And then Dally says that they have a spy, and it's Cherry. Cherry wanting to make peace and end this rivalry once and for all. And so finally Johnny says that we're going to turn ourselves in because he feels bad that Ponyboy got sucked into all of this, that it's not fair that his brothers have to worry about him, and that maybe he could be let off easy since it was in self-defense. And Dally isn't happy about that at all. He's saying, jail will make you tough. I don't want to see that happen to you the way it did for me. Because Johnny, he secretly admires Dally. We see that earlier when, as Ponyboy reads Gone with the Winds to Johnny, there's one point when he says about the guys riding off into sure death because they were gallant. He says that they remind him of Dally. And that one night I saw Dally getting picked up by the fuzz, and he kept real cool and calm the whole time. They was getting him for breaking out the windows in the school building, and it was Two-Bit who did that, and Dally knew it, but he just took the sentence without batting an eye or even denying it. That's gallant. And so Dally is going to drive them back to town, but then before they do, they see that the church that they had been staying in for the past few days is on fire. And it was from them that they accidentally started that fire with their cigarettes, their lighters. So it caught on fire and it's burning, and they learned that were kids playing near there. So there are kids that are trapped, and the adults tell them to stay back, but Ponyboy goes running in because he feels they're at fault. They're the ones who did this. But he runs in, and then Johnny follows him, and Dally's yelling at them to get back, but they go in to save the kids. And it's the moment where Ponyboy isn't afraid. He just has that adrenaline going. And then he says, I blinked myself. Johnny wasn't behaving at all like his old self. He looked over his shoulder and saw that the door was blocked by flames, then pushed open the window and tossed out the nearest kid. I caught one quick look at his face. It was red, marked from falling embers and sweat streaked, but he grinned at me. He wasn't scared either. That was the only time I can think of when I saw him without that defeated, suspicious look in his eyes. He looked like he was having the time of his life. This is really the peak of who Johnny really is. He is this nice kid who wants to help others. It's just he's caught up in this life where he's beaten down by everyone, and the only thing saving him from it all is the gang, his friends, Ponyboy and Dally and everyone. And so when they finally get the last kid out, then Johnny shoves Ponyboy to the window, telling him to get out. And he does, and he hears Johnny scream, and he turns to go back for him, but then Dally just comes up and clubs Ponyboy, because we later find out that Ponyboy was on fire, and Dally clubbed him to put the fire out. And we later learn that Dally went in there himself to rescue Johnny. And so at the hospital, Ponyboy reunites with his brothers. And they're overcome with so much joy and happiness because they thought they would never see Ponyboy again. And then Ponyboy has a moment where when he sees Dari, he sees that Dari is crying. And he says, in that second, what Soda and Dally and Two-Bit had been trying to tell me came through. Dari did care about me, maybe as much as he cared about Soda. And because he cared, he was trying too hard to make something of me. When he yelled, Pony, where have you been all this time? He meant, Pony, you've scared me to death. Please be careful, because I couldn't stand it if anything happened to you. And so he runs up to Dari and gives him a big hug. And he tells him he's sorry. And all Dari says is, oh, Pony, I thought we lost you, like we did Mom and Dad. And so Ponyboy finally realizes that the reason Derry was so tough on him is because he loves him, and he doesn't want to see him have this tough life that they have, because Soda has to work and Derry has to work. And Ponyboy is smart that he can make something of himself and really grow up and have a better life. And so that all comes through to him. And so they learn that Dally is going to be okay, but sadly that Johnny was injured so badly he's going to be crippled for the rest of his life. A piece of timber crushed his back and permanently broke his back, so he'll never be able to walk again. But Ponyboy and Johnny, they're being praised as heroes in the newspaper, and there's articles about them saying that they're from delinquents to heroes, and everything about what happened with the night Johnny killed Bob, and that Ponyboy is in the care of his oldest brother Derry, but that Soda and Ponyboy could be put into a foster home. And that's something that truly worries Ponyboy, because he loves his brothers. He doesn't want to be separated from them. That's his home, that's his family. And so with the impending rumble, then Ponyboy gets more of a look into the Socia's perspective once again, when Bob's best friend Randy asks to talk to him. And he talks to Ponyboy about how he read that he's a hero, and that it was brave of him to go in and save those kids, and that he wouldn't have done it. And he says, in fact, that I never would have believed that a greaser could pull something like that. And Ponyboy just says, Greaser didn't have anything to do with it. It's the individual. And Randy goes on to say how he's not going to participate in the Rumble because he doesn't feel it'll change anything, that fighting hasn't done any good. And he gives more insight about Bob, and that Bob was a good friend of his, and all Bob ever wanted was for someone to say no to him, but no one ever did. And that his parents were basically afraid of him, and that he got everything he ever wanted. So that's what made him the cocky kid that he was, and so hateful. He just wanted someone to say no. Toward the end of their conversation, he says, you would have saved those kids if you had been there. You'd have saved them the same way as we did. And Randy says, thanks, Grease. I didn't mean that. I meant thanks, kid. And Ponyboy says, my name's Ponyboy. Nice talking to you, Randy. And then later, Ponyboy is talking to Cherry again. And she asks about Johnny, and he says he's not doing well. You should go see him. But then she says she can't. He killed Bob. That she knows Bob was probably asking for it, but she saw something in Bob that others didn't, that he was the kind of kid that made him better than the crowd, that people would just follow him, and he had that charisma and that personality where people just looked up to him. And then she says, do you know what I mean? And finally, Ponyboy, getting angry, says, I wouldn't want you to see him. You're a traitor to your own kind and not loyal to us. Do you think your spying for us makes up for the fact that you're sitting there in a Corvette while my brother drops out of school to get a job? Don't you ever feel sorry for us. Don't you ever try to give us handouts and then feel high and mighty about it. But Cherry, getting upset, she says sincerely, I wasn't trying to give you charity, Ponyboy. I only wanted to help. I liked you from the start. The way you talked. You're a nice kid, Ponyboy. Do you realize how scarce nice kids are nowadays? Wouldn't you try to help me if you could? And Ponyboy says to the reader, I would. I'd help her and Randy both if I could. And then he says to Cherry, hey, can you see the sunset real good from the west side? And then she smiles, saying, real good. And he says, you can see it from the east side too. Basically saying that they're one and the same. That he understands her and she understands him. And so then when it is the night of the Rumble, Ponyboy is curious to learn why everyone likes to fight. So first he asks Soda, and Soda says, I don't know, it's action, it's a contest, like a drag race or a dance or something. And then Steve chimes in saying, shoot, I want to beat those Socs heads in. When I get in a fight, I want to stomp the other guy good. I like it too. And then he asks Dari, and Dari doesn't answer, but Soda just says he likes to show off his muscles. And then the last person he asks is 2-Bit why he likes fights. And 2-Bit just says flat out, shoot, everybody fights. And so then Ponyboy says, I had it then. Soda fought for fun, Steve for hatred, Dari for pride, and 2-Bit for conformity. Why do I fight? I thought, and couldn't think of any real good reason. There isn't any real good reason for fighting except self-defense. So, that's Ponyboy's thoughts on it. That he doesn't like fighting at all, but he does it when he has to. And so just before the Rumble's about to start, all of a sudden someone says, hold up, hold it, and it's none other than Dally. And Dally got out of the hospital because he had earlier asked for 2-Bit's precious blade that he always carried on him that he had stolen, and he used it on the nurse to threaten her and get out of the hospital. And so the description of the Rumble just happens really quickly because it's Ponyboy telling us, and it's just everything he's feeling and experiencing. Just him trying to jump on the Socs, take them down, but them pinning him down and kicking him, and a lot of punching and a lot of pain, and feeling like he's blacking out and everything's happening so suddenly. But then all of a sudden someone just says they're running, and Dari says, we won, we beat the Socs. And so they barely have time to soak that in when Dally just tells Ponyboy, come on, we're going to see Johnny. And Ponyboy is in pain, but he gets up and he runs, and they have little time, and Dally's saying, hurry, he was getting worse when I left, he wants to see you. And so they get to the hospital just in time, and Dally tells him, we won, we beat the Socs, we stomped them, chased them out of our territory. And Johnny's so weak, he's saying, useless, fighting's no good. And then Dally tells him that they're still writing editorials about him in the paper for being a hero, and that they're all proud of him. And Ponyboy says, Johnny's eyes glowed. Dally was proud of him. That was all Johnny had ever wanted. And then he asks for Ponyboy, and Ponyboy goes up to him, and he says the classic line, stay gold, Ponyboy, stay gold. And those are his final words, and then he dies. And Dally full on crumbles, saying, don't die, Donnie, please don't die, and then he just bolts out. And Ponyboy is just still all in a daze. He walks home, and then he sees everyone, and he just tells them, Dari asks him what's the matter, and he just tells them Johnny's dead, and that Dally's gone, he can't take it. And then 2-Bit says he finally broke, even Dally has a breaking point. And they barely have time to let that sit in before Dari gets a phone call, and he says that it was Dally, that he robbed a grocery store and the cops were after him. And then as they go there, Ponyboy thinks to himself, I remembered his voice. I've been carrying a heater. It ain't loaded, but it sure does help a bluff. And so when he pulls out his gun and holds it up to the police, they don't know that it isn't loaded. They shoot him down and kill him. And Ponyboy says, he was dead before he hit the ground. But I knew that was what he wanted, even as the lot echoed with the cracks of shots, even as I begged silently, please, not him and Johnny both. I knew he would be dead. because Dally Winston wanted to be dead and he always got what he wanted. And Ponyboy says, 2 friends of mine had died that night. One a hero, the other a hoodlum. And then at the hearing, Ponyboy's terrified that he's going to have to go to a foster home and never see his brothers again, but thankfully in the end, the case is closed and he gets to stay with Dari and Soda. But still he's struggling after this whole ordeal, and he ends up failing in a lot of his classes, and his teacher tells him that considering the circumstances, if you come up with a good semester theme, I'll pass you with a C grade for his English class. And there's one point when the Socs come up to Ponyboy saying, you're the guy that killed Bob Sheldon. He was a friend of ours. We don't like nobody killing our friends, especially greasers. And Ponyboy busts the end of his Coke bottle and points it at them, saying, you get back into your car or you'll get split. I mean it. I've had about all I can take from you guys. And when they drive off, 2-Bits says, Ponyboy, listen, don't get tough. You're not like the rest of us, and don't try to be. So basically what he's saying is that this could have been a turning point for Ponyboy. This could have been a moment after this whole terrible ordeal of losing 2 members of their gang, that this could have turned him into this cold kid with hatred and really tough the way Dally was. And Ponyboy says, what was the matter with 2-Bit? I knew as well as he did that if you got tough, you didn't get hurt. Get smart and nothing can touch you. And 2-Bit says, what in the world are you doing? And Ponyboy says, picking up the glass. And then 2-Bit grins and says, you little son of a gun. And Ponyboy says, I didn't know what he was talking about, so I just went on picking up the glass from the bottle end and put it in a trash can. I didn't want anyone to get a flat tire. And because that's who Ponyboy is, he still is this kind-hearted kid, that he can't have this rough exterior because it's not who he is. And so then, finally, when Ponyboy picks up the Gone with the Wind novel that Johnny had asked for in the hospital, and then later, after Johnny had passed, he had wanted Ponyboy to have the copy. So then he picks it up and he sees a piece of paper fall out, and it's a note from Johnny. And in the note he says that he doesn't mind dying anymore, even though at first he had said 16 was too young to die. He didn't get to see and do enough in his life, but he's glad that the kids are okay because they have more to live for. And then in the rest of the letter, he says, I'm just going to miss you guys. I've been thinking about it, and that poem, that guy that wrote it, he meant you're gold when you're a kid, like green. When you're a kid, everything's new, dawn. It's just when you get used to everything that it's day. Like the way you dig sunsets, Pony. That's gold. Keep that way. It's a good way to be. I want you to tell Dally to look at one. He'll probably think that you're crazy, but ask for me. I don't think he's ever really seen a sunset. And don't be so bugged over being a greaser. You still have a lot of time to make yourself be what you want. There's still lots of good in the world. Tell Dally. I don't think he knows. Your buddy, Johnny. And then Ponyboy thinks about how it was too late to tell Dally and that he doubts he would have listened anyway. And then he says, I could see boys going down under streetlights because they were mean and tough and hated the world, and it was too late to tell them that there was still good in it, and they wouldn't believe you if you did. It was too vast a problem to be just a personal thing. There should be some help. Someone should tell them before it was too late. Someone should tell their side of the story. And maybe people would understand then and wouldn't be so quick to judge a boy by the amount of hair oil he wore. It was important to me. And so then Ponyboy gets an idea for what he should write for his English composition. He thinks about the 3 boys who had died. He says, I sat down and picked up my pen and thought for a minute, remembering a handsome, dark boy with a reckless grin and a hot temper. A tough, tow-headed boy with a cigarette in his mouth and a bitter grin on his hard face, remembering, and this time it didn't hurt, a quiet, defeated-looking 16-year-old whose hair needed cutting badly and who had black eyes with a frightened expression on them. 1 week had taken all 3 of them, and I decided I could tell people, beginning with my English teacher. I wondered for a long time how to start that theme, how to start writing about something that was important to me, and I finally began like this. When I stepped out into the bright sunlight from the darkness of the movie house, I had only 2 things on my mind: Paul Newman and a ride home. The opening line of the novel, essentially implying that this was the story that Ponyboy wrote, telling their side of the story. That they're all just kids wanting something better, wanting a real chance to live life, not having to feel scared and lonely and isolated and rejected. And so that classic quote, "Stay gold, Ponyboy," it's just like saying, stay hopeful, stay optimistic, stay believing in good in yourself and in others. Stay innocent, stay kind, stay humble. It's all of those things. It's believing in the true beauty of kindness and hope. And it's so powerful, and as tragic as this book is, we're not meant to pity them, as Ponyboy himself says that he would take anyone's hate over their pity. It's just meant to empathize with these characters and with people, that we all have struggles and that they have these rough lives, and Ponyboy especially, that with all this terrible stuff that happened, there's still good in him and he can make something of himself, and he will, because he's smart. And he and his brothers and the rest of the greasers, they'll all be okay in the end. So what a wonderful, amazing book, and no wonder it's a classic to this day. So beautifully and powerfully written. And she was so young when she wrote it, S.E. Hinton, but it's absolutely amazing. A true classic tale about real bravery and what it means to be gallant and hopeful and golden. And with that, that's going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Storytelling Saga, as well as on Twitter at Storytell Saga. You can also send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by leaving me a message in the contact section of storytellingsaga.com or by sending me an email at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next week, I'll be doing another list episode. This time I'll be sharing my top 10 favorite television theme songs. So that'll be a lot of fun. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.